Hello and welcome back to AP Psychology. I am Mrs. Seguin and today we're going to be covering the last topic in Unit 1, Ethics in Psychology. This is a pretty fun one. We end up talking about ethics for the rest of the year, so pay really good attention today. Here are our lesson objectives. So we're going to identify how ethical issues both inform and constrain research practices, and then we're going to describe how ethical and legal guidelines protect research participants, both human and animal, and promote sound ethical practice. So who determines if it's ethical? Who says, yes, you can do this, and no, you can't do that? So the big one is the American Psychological Association, otherwise known as the APA. They created a code of ethics in 1953 that we still adhere to. It's 4 or 5 basic principles that all research is held to that standard of ethics. But in reality, you're not going to take your research proposal to the APA. You're going to take your research proposal to what's called an Institutional Review Board, or an IRB. They review your research proposal, your research plan, which you have to have in excruciating detail, and they maintain the standards of ethics. And so they'll bring up points that violate an ethics standard, or say, no, you can't do this research because it would cause harm to humans or animals that's unnecessary. Colleges have their own IRBs, and there are regional IRBs if you're not associated with a college. Basic APA ethics guidelines. The first one is to obtain participants' informed consent. You will hear that phrase, informed consent, so many times in psychology. Basically, you need to tell them what they need to know so that they can consent, and they have to give their consent. You can't do something to them unknowingly. The second one is to protect them from physical and emotional harm and discomfort. So that is physical and emotional harm. So you cannot take a 6-year-old boy and traumatize him with a white rat in the little Albert experiment, remember? The third one is we're going to keep information about our participants confidential. So we want to protect our participants and their rights to privacy. The fourth is we're going to fully debrief people after the experiment or the research is finished. So they need to know, what did they contribute? What was the purpose of the experiment? So on and so forth. But you probably couldn't tell them everything before. So you're going to fully debrief them afterwards. All right, so here's the process. A psychologist goes, hey, I want to learn about this behavior or this phenomenon. They write a research proposal. That proposal must be in extreme detail to the what am I going to measure, how am I going to use it, operational definitions, so on and so forth. Before a psychologist can begin their research, though, their plans have to go before the IRB, typically at a university, and that IRB screens the research. They vet that research. They pick it apart, the research proposals, and they safeguard participants' well-being. So the purpose of the IRB is to protect the human and animal participants of a psychological research experiment. Okay, so let's go a little deeper into those ethical standards. What is informed consent? So researchers must inform their participants fully about the study to ensure that the participation in the study is voluntary. So there's none of this, well, if I had known about that, I wouldn't have done it. That's not a thing, because they'll tell you everything so that you know exactly what you're getting into. Minors are not allowed to give written consent. So people under the age of 18 are not allowed to give written consent. So they must give assent. Basically what that means is the parent or guardian will sign consent for them. However, the researcher has to be consistently checking in on the minor participant and asking them, hey, are you still okay with this? Hey, here's the next step. Are you still okay? Are you still okay? And the minor has to continually be giving assent, verbal assent. If the minor at any point says, no, I'm not okay with this, the experiment stops. The second standard here is limited deception. So deception is only allowed in an experiment where it is absolutely necessary to the success of the study. So there have been experiments, for example, where they bring a person in and they tell them that it's to see if they can guess the difference between something, line distances. But really what they're trying to see is if they will go against the group dynamic. So of course they can't tell them that, because if they tell them that, then it's going to mess with the experiment. However, it's not going to hurt them, the little lie that they were told, right? If any deception is used, if any of it is used, it must be discussed after the experiment during that debrief period. So the things that you can't tell them about the experiment before, you have to tell them afterwards. Okay, the next one is protection from harm and discomfort, both physical and emotional. Discomfort or risk involved in participating in the study must be minimized. It should be minimal discomfort or risk. This includes the participants suffering long-term physical or emotional consequences. Participants maintain the freedom to continue or withdraw at any time. So if at any point they go, I'm not comfortable with this, they can back out. Then we come to confidentiality. We want to keep all the information about our participants concealed and private to protect their privacy rights. Results must be produced and reported such that the personal information remains hidden. So you can't go, so-and-so said this to the survey. It's anonymous surveys. If it's not anonymous, then that information is not going to be disclosed to the public. And then debriefing. Debriefing is a huge step. Participants must be made aware of any and all relevant information about the study afterwards. They must correct any misunderstandings or misinterpretations. So if they said something that came off different than it was intended, we need to correct those and make sure that participants leave in the same condition which they arrived and they are not harmed in any way. Okay, then we get to animal research. Now, there are differing opinions about this, and I am not here to get political, okay? But just as with human participants in research, there are guidelines to protect our animal friends. So just realize that if we don't have to harm an animal, we're not going to, okay? So let's start with that. Why do we even use animals? Why do we even need to? Animal research can be used to provide information that would be impossible or unethical to obtain from humans. So there are some stretches to the animal ethics that are not there for humans because obviously they're animals versus humans. They're different. So we want to keep our standards really, really high for humans. Of course, the standards for animals are not quite that high. They're still high. If animals are harmed in any way by research, this is the main standard, it must be deemed absolutely necessary for human welfare. Like, an animal will not be harmed in psychological research unless it is absolutely necessary for human welfare. All right, so who determines if it is ethical to use animals in research? Again, we have the American Psychological Association, their Code of Ethics, created in 1953. And then instead of an IRB, you have the IACUC, which is the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. So they're going to determine, is this research with an animal, if it's going to be harmed especially, absolutely necessary to human welfare? If the animal's not going to be harmed, if we're just going to study it, or, other things that aren't going to hurt it, then they'll run that through their Code of Ethics. Here's the ABCs of animal research ethics. A is appropriate treatment. Animals must be treated appropriately. They must not be subjected to anything cruel or unusual, so no injecting them with cancer cells, unless it's deemed necessary for human welfare. Beneficial, so animal research must be beneficial. It must benefit human psychological research. We can't do it because we're curious. It has to actually benefit humans in some way. And then it must be caring. Animals must be cared for properly, including their living space, their food, and other living conditions. There are limits on how many animals can go in a cage and what types of cages, and there's all kinds of different limits. All right, I want you to stop here, fill in your notes, make sure you understand the APA Standards of Ethics, the purpose of an IRB, and the IACUC, and animal ethics standards. All right, in this lesson, we learned to identify how ethical issues both inform and constrain research practices, and then we learned to describe how ethical and legal guidelines protect research participants and promote sound ethical practice. All right, tomorrow, what's next? We have our activity, the ethics application activity, and then no homework. Woohoo! The next day, come prepared, topic quiz 1.6. The day after that, test 1 review. The day after that, unit test 1. Guys, we are this close to being done with unit 1. Give me your all. All right, that is all I have for you today. Here is your daily meme. And with that, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.